The moment I realized my company had put a price on my blood, my coffee stopped tasting like coffee and started tasting like rust. I was standing in the financial department's glass cube, watching my reflection multiply in the mirrored walls like a man being quietly erased. Steel beams, white light, the soft hum of servers, the smell of antiseptic layered over burnt espresso. This place always smelled like something that wanted to pretend it was clean. I had 3 screens open, 12 contracts queued, and a deadline that didn't care whether I had slept. Which I hadn't. It was supposed to be routine, quarterly audit, risk assessment, cross-checking collateral categories. I scrolled past property assets, intellectual rights, equipment, biotech patents. Then my cursor stopped. Biological guarantees, active. That category almost never showed up in my workload. It was for rare materials. Experimental strains. Occasionally, very occasionally, donors. I clicked. A new window opened. And there it was, my name. Not as an author, not as a reviewer, not even as a subject. Lucas Hale. Genetic asset. Primary collateral. For a second, I genuinely thought someone had pulled a very unfunny joke. I blinked once, then again. The letters didn't change. Something hot and electric slid down my spine. My palms went damp against the edge of the desk. The room felt suddenly smaller, as if the glass walls had leaned in to listen. I laughed under my breath. A soft, confused sound. No, I whispered. No. I opened the attached file. My medical profile unfolded across the screen in cold, precise diagrams. Blood compatibility, cellular regeneration coefficients. A long paragraph labeled strategic genetic value. I didn't read it all. I didn't need to. My pulse climbed into my throat. The coffee in my stomach curdled. The faint metallic taste at the back of my tongue sharpened.
If this story caught you, subscribe. More are waiting.
As if my body had recognized the word blood and decided to participate. I stood up too fast. The room tilted. I grabbed the desk, knuckles whitening, and forced air into my lungs. The servers kept humming. The lights stayed perfectly even. The corporation did not care that something inside me had just cracked. I flagged the file and nearly ran down the corridor to legal. The junior assistant at the front desk looked about 19 and permanently apologetic. "Hi," I said, keeping my voice light with the kind of effort people usually reserve for funerals. "I think there's a mistake in one of your contracts." He swallowed. "Your name, sir?" "Hale Lucas." His fingers flew over the keyboard. The color drained from his face. He didn't look up. My stomach dropped. "Can you confirm," I asked carefully, "that my genetic profile is not listed as corporate collateral?" There was a long pause. The kind that stretches. Then he whispered, It's active, sir. Active. Like a subscription. Like a surveillance camera. Like something that had been waiting." "I don't understand what that means," I said. He finally lifted his eyes. They were wide. Uncomfortable. Afraid. "It means," he said, "that legally you are part of the debt structure." The words hit me in stages. Legally. You are part of the debt. I felt heat crawl up my neck. Shame, sharp and irrational. As if I had been caught doing something obscene. As if my body had been misfiled on purpose. "So I'm, what? A guarantor?" I tried to joke. It came out thin. He hesitated. "Then, you are listed as primary biological security." The world narrowed to the soft click of his keyboard, and the way my reflection trembled in the polished wall behind him. "Who authorized this?" I asked. The elevator at the end of the hall chimed. Footsteps approached. Slow. Measured. The air shifted. An alpha. I didn't need heightened senses to know that. My skin knew. The space knew. Even the assistant's shoulders straightened as if pulled by invisible threads. A man stepped into view. Tall, dark suit cut with surgical precision, expression composed in the way people get when they've made peace with things they shouldn't have survived. "Lucas Hale," he said calmly. "I'm Kieran Vale. Creditor consortium." His gaze met mine, cool, unreadable, almost gentle. "I believe," he continued, "we need to discuss your role in our current liabilities." The assistant slid a tablet across the desk. On the signature line, beneath the biometric authorization, was a name I had learned to write before I'd learned to multiply. Richard Hale, my uncle. Shock came first. Then denial. Then a slow, burning rise of something that tasted nothing like coffee at all. My uncle's office had always smelled like old money and polished control. Warm wood paneling. Leather chairs that sighed when you sat in them. Framed photographs of men who all looked vaguely related and uniformly disappointed. The founders of the Hale line. The board. The first biotech division. Wolves in suits, smiling like they'd invented both progress and mercy. I stood in the center of the room with the tablet still in my hand, my name burning through the glass. Uncle Richard didn't look up right away. He was finishing a message, calm as ever, stylus moving with unhurried precision. "Give me one moment, Lucas." I didn't. "What did you do?" I asked. He paused. Set the stylus down. Only then did he raise his eyes. They were kind. They always were. That was part of the problem. "Close the door," he said gently. I didn't move. "Lucas." I shut it. The soft click sounded far too final. He gestured to the chair across from him. I stayed standing. "My DNA," I said, and hated the way my voice cracked around something that shouldn't have been fragile. "Why is my DNA listed as collateral?" He folded his hands, leaned back slightly. "You found it," he said. "Not a question. Answer me." A breath. Slow. Controlled. "Our debts reached a point where traditional assets were no longer sufficient. So you sold me." "No." His voice sharpened. "I secured you." The words landed wrong. "Like calling a cage a shelter. You signed a contract," I said. "With my body?" "With your genetic value," he corrected. "There is a difference." I laughed. I didn't mean to. It scraped out of my throat like something breaking free. "Do you hear yourself?" "Lucas," he said patiently, "our corporation employs over 8,000 people. We supply medical compounds to half the registered wolf population on the coast. If we collapsed, lives would be affected. Mine is apparently negotiable." He didn't deny that. He reached into a drawer and placed a printed file on the desk between us. Numbers. Projections. Red columns stacked like open wounds. The scale of the debt made my stomach hollow. "Your gene," he continued, "is one of 3 currently known to stabilize the new serum line. The creditors required security they couldn't liquidate." My skin crawled. "So I'm unmovable property." "You are family," he said. "And family protects what matters." I stared at him. This man who had taught me to ride a bike. Who had slipped me money in envelopes labeled "Don't tell your mother." Who had told me I was clever. That I would go far. "You didn't even ask me." "There wasn't time." "There's never time when it's someone else's body." His jaw tightened. Just slightly. "I kept you inside the system," he said. "Here, with access, with protection." "Do you know what happens to independent carriers?" I didn't answer. "They disappear into research programs, offshore facilities, non-disclosure settlements. You still have a life." Something in me bent. "You call this a life?" "I call it survival." We looked at each other across generations and bloodlines, and a desk that suddenly felt like a border. "You taught me assets were things," I said quietly. "Buildings, patents, equipment." "Yes. I'm not a thing." "No," he agreed. "You're leverage." The word struck harder than any insult. I turned before he could see what it did to my face. The corridors outside were all glass and light, and people who didn't know they were walking past a crime scene. I didn't remember reaching the elevators. Only the way my reflection followed me in the blackened doors, pale, unfocused, already catalogued. The elevator chimed. The doors slid open. Kieran Vale was inside. Alone. He glanced up, taking me in with that unsettling stillness. His gaze flicked briefly to the tablet clenched in my hand. "Rough meeting?" he asked. I stepped in. The doors closed with a soft, airtight whisper. "You already know the answer," I said. A faint curve touched his mouth. Not a smile. More like acknowledgement. "Family negotiations are always the most expensive," he said. I exhaled sharply. "Did you enjoy watching him justify it?" His eyes didn't leave mine. "No. That was fast." "Experience," he replied. The elevator began its descent. The quiet between us thickened. "You looked surprised," I said. "In legal?" "I was," he said. "That they let you find out this way. That's what shocked you." "That they didn't prepare you," he corrected. "Not that it happened." I clenched my jaw. "So this is normal. Turning people into balance sheets." His gaze softened, just a fraction. "Normal," he said, "is a word people use when they're tired of being horrified. The floor numbers slid past. I hated how that landed. I hated that something in his voice recognized the shape of what I was feeling. The doors opened. As I stepped out, he spoke again. For what it's worth, Lucas Hale. Assets don't usually walk out of that office on their own. I didn't turn around, but the strange, unwanted pull in my chest followed me down the hall anyway. The medical wing didn't look like a place where people were bought. It looked like a spa designed by someone who had never touched another human being. White floors polished to a soft glow. Glass walls fogged just enough to feel private. The constant hush of filtered air. Everything smelled faintly of citrus disinfectant, and something metallic beneath it, like a secret. Dr. Evelyn Moore met me at the lab doors. She was tall, precise, her silver hair pulled into a knot so tight it seemed to lift her cheekbones. Her eyes were bright in a way that had nothing to do with warmth. Lucas Hale, she said, extending a gloved hand, I'm glad we finally get to meet under more honest circumstances. I didn't take her hand. Define honest. She smiled as if I'd complimented her. The lab opened behind her like a cathedral of glass and light. Tubes. Scanners. Vats of faintly glowing fluid. Screens pulsing with data that tracked bodies the way markets track currency. Your gene, she began as we walked, is a stabilizing variant. Extremely rare. It allows werewolf physiology to accept aggressive regenerative compounds without cellular rejection. So I'm a compatibility patch. A keystone, she corrected. Without carriers like you, half our advanced serum lines would collapse. Her tone was reverent. Proud. My stomach tightened. She guided me onto a chair and fastened a thin band around my upper arm. A technician approached with a needle too fine to look dangerous. I don't remember consenting to this, I said. Dr. Moore's gaze flicked briefly to the glass wall beyond the lab. Your corporation did, she replied. The needle slid in. I expected pain. Instead, there was a strange warmth spreading under my skin like something waking up. The room tilted a fraction. My ears rang. On the screen beside me, my blood blossomed into branching patterns of light. There, Dr. Moore murmured. See that integration speed? Extraordinary. Something sour rose in my throat. The world narrowed to the hum of machines and the steady pull at my vein. I swallowed. I need a minute. My vision blurred at the edges. Someone caught my elbow. Careful, Kieran. I hadn't heard him enter. He was standing too close, the clean scent of his cologne cutting through antiseptic. His hand was firm on my arm, grounding in a way that made my pulse trip over itself. He's done, he said. Dr. Moore hesitated. We haven't completed the... He's done, Kieran repeated softly. The technician froze. Dr. Moore studied him, displeasure flickering across her features. But she nodded. The needle was removed. A cotton pad pressed to my skin. The relief was immediate and humiliating. Kieran didn't let go until my breathing evened. Thank you, I said before I could stop myself. He inclined his head. You don't owe me. The medical block lay beyond the lab, rooms arranged like hotel suites, too tasteful to admit their purpose. This is where the compounds go, Dr. Moore said, regaining her composure. And where we observe their effects. She opened one of the doors. Inside, a young man sat on the edge of a bed, swinging his feet like a child. His hair was dark and unruly. His skin carried the faint golden undertone of a wolf who had shifted too many times too young. He looked up and smiled. Hey, he said easily. You lost too? Jonah is part of our current treatment cohort, Dr. Moore explained. Advanced muscular degeneration, pre-serum. Jonah snorted. Translation, my wolf was eating me alive. I stepped inside before I realized I was moving. How do you feel? I asked. Like someone turned the volume down on my bones, he said. The meds hurt. But they work. Dr. Moore gestured to a tray of injector pens and vials on the side table. Each one bore a code. A batch number. A price. Jonah followed my gaze. Don't look like that, he said. I know what they cost. I used to run numbers too. You did? Accounting, he shrugged. Before I couldn't hold a pen, the words landed quietly. Brutally. They told me, he continued, that these serums come from people who can handle the strain. People who don't break. He looked at me, something curious and grateful softening his expression. Guess that's you. Something twisted behind my ribs. Dr. Moore launched into an explanation of success rates and projected expansions. of how many patients could be treated if the carrier pool increased, of how much suffering could be prevented. All I could see were the injector pens, how small they were, how much of me they carried. You make it sound, I said, like the only problem with owning people is supply. She opened her mouth. Kieran spoke first. That will be enough. Dr. Moore turned sharply. Excuse me? You're talking about him, he said, as if he isn't in the room. He represents a solution, she replied coolly. He is not a solution, Kieran said. The words were quiet. They cut, anyway. Dr. Moore's lips thinned, but she stepped back. Jonah glanced between us. Wow, he murmured. Do you two always flirt like this, or am I special? A startled laugh broke out of me before I could catch it. Kieran's mouth twitched. For a moment the room felt almost normal. Then Dr. Moore cleared her throat, and the smell of disinfectant rushed back in. As we left, Jonah called after me, Hey, thanks. For whatever part of you is in that stuff. I didn't know what to say. Outside the room my hands were shaking. Kieran noticed. Of course he did. You okay? He asked. No, I said honestly. But I'm starting to understand what I'm worth. His gaze held mine, unreadable. That, he replied, is usually the most dangerous part. The restaurant occupied the top 3 floors of the tower, like a crown someone had decided to make edible. Glass everywhere. Dark stone. Soft lighting that pretended intimacy while reflecting you back at yourself from every angle. Below us, the city spread out in veins of gold and white, pulsing, alive, indifferent. Kieran hadn't asked if I wanted dinner. He'd said, You should eat, in the same tone someone might use for you should breathe. I followed him anyway. Corporate predators filled the room. Executives, investors, visiting alphas and their polished entourages. People who wore their power like tailored coats. Conversations hovered just under laughter, sharp with implication. We were seated near the windows. I took the chair that didn't put my back to the room out of habit. He noticed. Of course he did. Smart, he said mildly. But unnecessary. Because I'm already owned? I shot back. A pause. Then because no one here would touch you without permission. And who would they need permission from? I asked. His eyes met mine. Something unreadable crossed them. Not me. The waiter arrived, breaking the tension with practiced grace. Wine lists. Recommendations. I ordered water. Kieran ordered for himself. Something expensive and rare. He didn't ask me to change my mind. Silence settled between us. Not awkward, but alert. Like two people circling the same question from opposite ends. You didn't snarl at me in the lab, I said finally. Or threaten. Or try to alpha your way into compliance. He lifted a brow. Is that what you expected? Isn't it what you're supposed to do? He considered that. People expect alphas to be blunt instruments, he said. Loud, territorial, predictable. And you're, what, a scalpel? Something like that. The faintest smile touched his mouth. It startled me more than a snarl would have. You always talk like a brochure? I asked. No, he replied. Only when I'm nervous. I blinked. You're nervous? Yes. That's either a lie or very bad news. Why not both? A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Quick. Disbelieving. There it was again. That sense of wrong-footedness, of my expectations missing him entirely. Our food arrived. Perfectly plated. Almost aggressively beautiful. I hate the word asset, he said suddenly. I looked up. It flattens things, he continued. Turns history into inventory. Reduces bodies to balance sheets. That's oddly specific. Experience tends to be. I studied him over the rim of my glass. The cut of his suit. The stillness of him. The way the city lights carved pale lines along his cheekbones. Then, why work for people who trade in them? I asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. Around us, Deals murmured. Glass clinked. Someone laughed too loudly. Because, he said at last, it's easier to dismantle a machine from the inside. Something in his voice made my chest tighten. We ate. Spoke about inconsequential things. Market volatility. A disastrous board retreat he'd once attended, involving a hot tub and a very drunk senator's son. I told him about my first month at the company and how I'd reconciled 2 entirely incompatible ledgers because I was too afraid to admit I didn't understand them. That's not fear, he said. That's survival. The word lingered between us. I realized, distantly, that my shoulders had lowered, that my jaw didn't ache from clenching, that the constant background tension in my spine had eased into something almost like quiet. It disturbed me how safe that felt. I excused myself to get more water. On my way back, I slowed near a cluster of glass partitions separating the main dining floor from the private lounges. That was when I heard her. Mara's voice was unmistakable, precise, sharp-edged, pleasant in the way knives can be. "The Hale carrier," she was saying. "He's ideal. Genetic stability, corporate access, minimal resistance so far." Another voice murmured something I couldn't catch. Mara gave a soft, humorless laugh. "The consortium has been cultivating this bloodline for decades. He's exactly what we built the system to harvest." My fingers tightened around the glass. "And Vale?" the other voice asked. "He's efficient," Mara replied, "as he should be. He knows better than anyone what happens to assets that start thinking they're people." The words slid under my skin. I stood there for a heartbeat too long. Then I turned back. Kieran looked up as I returned to the table. Something in my face must have shifted. "Lucas?" he asked. I sat down slowly. For the first time since finding my name in that file, the warmth in my chest cooled into something watchful. I had mistaken calm for safety. And somewhere behind Kieran's composed gaze, the machine was still turning. The old server archive was buried beneath 3 newer ones, like a basement no one admitted the building still had. No glass walls. No citrus disinfectant. Just concrete humming machinery. And the smell of dust heated by electricity. The lights flickered with the tired patience of something that had outlived every excuse to be here. I wasn't supposed to have access. Which meant I still did. The badge on my neck opened the first door. The second. The third. Inside, rows of obsolete servers blinked like a field of dying stars. Cold air washed over my skin, raising goosebumps along my arms. This was where the company sent its ghosts. I logged into a terminal. At first the files looked like what I expected: discontinued research programs, collapsed partnerships, genetic initiatives that had been quietly concluded. I started cross-referencing. Project names. Bloodline tags. Stabilization variants. Carrier classifications. The pattern emerged slowly, like a bruise. Hale-adjacent lines. Peripheral families. Non-alpha carriers. Short program lifespans. Sudden terminations. And then, nothing. Names appeared for 3, 5, sometimes 8 years. And then vanished from the internal system entirely. No death records. No transfers. No exit contracts. Just removal. My throat tightened. I refined the search. Restricted. Heavily restricted. The first profile that opened belonged to a woman named Maribel Rook. Carrier. Beta. Age at enrollment, 22. The attached image showed a girl with uneven bangs and a crooked smile, holding what looked like a terrible latte. Status, reassigned. No further details. The second file belonged to a man in his 30s. The third to a teenage boy. The fourth. I froze. Evan Hale. I didn't recognize the name at first. Then the system populated the genealogical tree. Second cousin. Removed branch. Carrier variant match, partial. Age at enrollment, 13. My fingers hovered uselessly above the keyboard. A soft ringing filled my ears. The cold room pressed closer, as if the servers had leaned in. I opened more files. Children. Not many. Enough. Every one of them routed through the same intermediary holding structure. Every one of them flagged with the same internal designation. Long-term acquisition. I sank into the chair, breath coming too shallow. The hum of the machines vibrated through my bones. This wasn't collateral. This was cultivation. Footsteps sounded somewhere beyond the shelving. I didn't look up. I knew who it would be. "You're very far from your department," Kieran said. His voice carried strangely here, muted by concrete and distance, stripped of the polish it wore upstairs. "Were you planning on reporting me?" I asked. "No." "Stopping me?" A pause. "Perhaps." I finally turned. He stood at the end of the aisle, half in shadow, suit dark against darker steel. His gaze slid to the terminal. To the open files. Something flickered across his face. Recognition. Then something sharper. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Because this place doesn't exist," I replied. "Or because it tells the truth." His jaw tightened. "Close the files, Lucas." "No." You don't understand what you're looking at. I understand exactly what I'm looking at, I said, my voice shaking now. I'm looking at a harvest. He took a step forward. The air shifted with him. Do not make this about rhetoric. 13, I said. One of them was 13. His breath left him in a slow, controlled exhale. This system, he said carefully, predates you. Predates your uncle. It doesn't care about intent. Only yield. So, you know, I work for a creditor consortium, he snapped. The edge in his voice cut through the cold. What did you think they collected? Debts, I said bitterly. Not people. The words seemed to hit him. He moved closer, stopping just short of my space. His control strained, like a surface under pressure. You think I don't see them? He said. You think I don't know their names? Their ages? Their projected longevity under strain? Then how can you? Because seeing is not the same as stopping, he said sharply. And getting caught in archives doesn't dismantle anything. Neither does protecting it. His gaze burned. You think this is protection? I think, I said, standing, that you're standing between me and something that scares you. Silence stretched. The servers hummed. For a moment, he looked young, not in face, in posture, in the way something unguarded flickered and then slammed shut. You're not ready for this, he said quietly. Neither were they. My voice broke on the word. He looked away. Just briefly. It felt like a confession. When he met my eyes again, something in them had shifted, not softer, but exposed. Get out of this room, he said. Before someone notices you're missing. And then what? I demanded. I pretend I didn't see them? He hesitated. I don't know, he admitted. The honesty landed heavier than any threat. I logged out. But the names stayed. They followed me as I passed him. As I walked back through the narrow service corridors. As I climbed the stairs toward the light. I had come looking for leverage. I had found graves without dates. And somewhere between the flickering servers and Kieran's almost fractured composure, something inside me stopped being afraid and started being angry. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw folders instead of dreams. Names instead of faces. Ages instead of memories. By midnight, the office tower had thinned to a skeleton crew, and the kind of silence that makes every sound feel like a confession. I was in a closed negotiation room on the 39th floor when I finally did it. I pulled up the image again. The one I hadn't meant to find. A low-resolution archive photo, buried so deeply it felt less like data and more like sediment. A boy, maybe 15. Dark hair falling into his eyes. Too thin. Too still. A medical band around his wrist. Under the image. Kieran Vale. Carrier classification. Active. Program status. Retained. The door opened softly. I didn't jump. I'd been waiting. Kieran stopped when he saw the screen. For a long moment, he didn't move at all. Then he closed the door behind him and rested his hand against it, as if grounding himself. How long have you had that? He asked. Long enough, I said. The city glowed behind him through the glass wall. White threads of traffic. Distant towers blinking like watchful eyes. He looked out of place in that light, like something remembered rather than present. You ran the old registries, he said. Yes. And found the children? Yes. His jaw flexed. Then he stepped closer. Show me. I turned the screen. He didn't flinch. But something in his eyes dimmed, like a room losing power. That was taken in a facility outside Portland, he said. They used to call it a rehabilitation campus. For what? For us. He exhaled slowly and took the chair opposite me. I was 8 when they flagged my blood, he continued. My parents were debt-buried. Wolves without territory, without leverage. The consortium bought what they could extract. What they could extract, I repeated. My mother tried to fight it, he said. She hired lawyers, went to media outlets. They froze her accounts and labeled her unstable. He didn't look at me when he spoke. His gaze fixed somewhere beyond the glass. They told me I was helping people, he went on. That my blood was rare. That I was valuable. They taught me numbers before they taught me how to drive. Compliance. Before autonomy. My chest felt tight. Crowded. They raised us in tiers, he said. The more compatible you were, the more privileges you earned. Better rooms. Better food. Access to education. The illusion of choice. You were a child, I said. Yes. A pause. And then I wasn't. His mouth curved without humor. They trained me for administration once it was clear my tolerance levels wouldn't hold forever. Finance, law, negotiation. They didn't want carriers who broke. They wanted carriers who could manage others. Who could help run the harvest, I said quietly. He closed his eyes. For a long time, he said. I thought surviving meant becoming useful. The words struck too close. How did you get out? I asked. I didn't, he replied. I moved inward. The room felt smaller. They offered me a seat instead of a bed, he said. A suit instead of a band. Authority instead of sedation. And you took it. Yes. Why? His eyes lifted then. And there was no armor in them. Because power was the first thing they gave me that didn't hurt. The honesty of it cracked something open between us. I stood without realizing I was going to. He did too. We were close. Too close for a negotiation room. Too close for a system built on distance. You didn't become them, I said. His breath brushed my cheek. I did? No, I said. You learned their language. That's the same thing. It isn't. Our gazes held. I could feel him, the pull of his presence, the restrained intensity of him, the way my body responded before my mind decided anything at all. Lucas, he murmured. It was the first time he'd said my name like that. Not as a file. Not as a liability. As a person. The space between us narrowed. Almost. Not a kiss. A breath away from one. The kind of closeness that carries 1,000 other decisions inside it. His hand lifted, stopping just short of my shoulder. And then he stepped back. The sudden distance was like cold water. You should stay away from me, he said. My pulse hammered. Because you're dangerous? Because I'm still part of it, he replied. And you don't yet understand how much, Kieran. If you keep digging, he interrupted, they will notice. And if they notice, they won't negotiate. They will contain. I shook my head. I'm already contained. He looked at me then. Really looked. And something like fear crossed his face. I won't be the one who delivers you to them, he said quietly. The words landed like a promise and a threat in one. He turned and left the room. The door closed. The city kept burning outside the glass, and I stood there alone with a boy on a screen, and an alpha in my blood, and the growing, terrifying understanding that the system had not just built Kieran. It had shaped what he was still fighting not to be. The notice arrived at 8:03. Not by email. By summons. My access badge locked the moment I stepped out of the elevator. The familiar green glow flickered red, then pulsed a slow, patient yellow. Restricted. A legal escort was already waiting. Mr. Hale, the woman said politely. There's been a procedural update. Please come with me. Procedural update. That was what the system called a tightening noose. The legal department had rearranged overnight. Temporary walls had appeared. Additional scanners. New cameras mounted where there hadn't been any yesterday. Even the air felt different. Cooler, thinner, processed. Mara waited inside the main conference suite. She looked impeccable. As always. Pale suit. Dark lips. Eyes bright with the satisfaction of someone whose prediction had just come true. Good morning, Lucas, she said. You're early. I was summoned, I replied. Ah, yes. She gestured to the chair opposite her. Things are moving more quickly than anticipated. On the table lay a thin stack of documents. Not contracts. Authorizations. The consortium has exercised its acceleration clause, she continued. Given recent irregularities, they've decided to finalize security transfers immediately. My stomach hollowed. What irregularities? I asked. Her gaze flicked briefly to the wall. Unauthorized data access, she said. Unscheduled lab activity. Disruptive behavior. Kieran, I said. Mara smiled faintly. Among others. I scanned the pages. Medical compliance. Movement restrictions. Mandatory observation periods. You're putting me in custody, I said. We prefer stabilization, she replied. You'll retain corporate residence, medical support, structured work access. I'm being contained. Her smile thinned. You're being protected. The words tasted like a repeat of my uncle's. As if summoned by the thought, the doors opened. Richard Hale entered, expression composed, eyes tired. You agreed to this, I said. He closed the door behind him. I agreed to prevent escalation, he replied. You've drawn attention. To what? I demanded. The fact that you sold a bloodline? Lower your voice. No. Mara observed us like an interesting exhibit. The consortium is nervous, my uncle said. They don't like unpredictability. This is a compromise. Between who and my spine? I snapped. His jaw tightened. Between collapse and containment. You promised I'd be protected. You are. By locking me in a medical ward? By keeping you inside a system we can influence. The room felt too small for the words we were throwing. You taught me to read contracts, I said. You taught me what leverage is. And you used me like one. His eyes softened. I used what I had. I laughed. The sound surprised even me. What you had was a nephew. Mara cleared her throat. If we could redirect, she said smoothly. We still need your formal acknowledgement. She slid a tablet across the table. I didn't touch it. I want to see him, I said. Mara raised a brow. Who? You know exactly who. Another glance to the wall. A door opened. Kieran stepped in. And the room went colder. His expression was neutral. Perfect. The calm mask I'd first met in legal. Mr. Hale, he said. No Lucas. No familiarity. Just a file address. I stared at him. Waiting for something. Anything. He didn't give it. The transfer process will begin today, he said. The medical block has been prepared. You're really doing this, I said quietly. He met my gaze. It is already in motion. After everything you told me. Something flickered behind his eyes. Then, it vanished. This is not a personal matter, he said. It was worse than anger. It was absence. I felt it like a door slamming somewhere deep in my chest. Mara exhaled in satisfaction. I'm glad we're aligned. 2 guards appeared at the door. I didn't look away from him. You said you wouldn't deliver me to them. His jaw set. I said, he replied, that I wouldn't be the one who did. The words cut. The guards stepped closer. The meeting dissolved into motion. Documents collected, signatures logged, instructions issued. I was escorted out. Through legal. Through glass corridors. Past offices where people were already pretending not to see me. The medical block doors slid open with a hush. White. Clean. Ready. As they led me inside, I finally felt it. The loss, not of freedom, of illusion. The belief that proximity to power meant protection. The belief that Kieran's quiet resistance meant safety. The system had noticed me. And the system was collecting. As the doors sealed behind me, something hard and steady settled under the fear. If I was going to be contained, then I would become the fault line. And make them regret building on me at all. Containment lasted exactly 12 hours. Long enough for them to run baseline tests. Long enough to flood my system with sedatives disguised as supplements. Long enough for the cameras to learn the rhythm of my breathing. Not long enough to stop me thinking. They underestimated one thing. I wasn't muscle. I wasn't magic. I was infrastructure. And infrastructure knows where things break. By morning, they transferred me to corporate residence, my apartment, retrofitted. 2 new sensors. Restricted network access. A polite medical bracelet around my wrist that pulsed whenever I moved too far from the approved zones. The illusion of freedom. I waited until the door sealed. Then I tore the bracelet off with my teeth. It screamed. I didn't care. My laptop was already open. They'd throttled my access to current systems. They hadn't touched the old ones. The corporation's backbone ran on updated skins, but the core protocols, financial, genetic, logistical, were layered over legacy architecture no one had wanted to dismantle, because dismantling meant exposure. I slipped into them the way I'd slipped into audits my whole career. Slow, methodical, invisible. The weakness wasn't the contracts. It was the dependencies. Every serum batch. Every research facility. Every carrier transfer. All of it linked back to 3 stabilizing indexes. All of them calibrated to blood like mine. The system couldn't just own carriers. It had engineered itself so it couldn't function without them. Which meant if the data behind compatibility changed, the market broke. The product failed. The contracts devoured themselves. I pulled up the medical research network. Dr. Moore's credentials lit up like a warning flare. I routed through an internal maintenance tunnel, and dropped into a subsystem she'd designed herself. Then I messaged her. 1 line. If you care more about outcomes than ownership, meet me. The response came in under a minute. Coordinates. No commentary. The underground lab sat beneath a disused pharmaceutical annex, hidden behind the fiction of renovations that had never ended. Half the lights were out. The air smelled like dust and ethanol. Dr. Moore was already there, coat discarded, sleeves rolled. "You're moving faster than expected," she said. "They accelerated the process," I replied. "So am I." I showed her what I'd found. Not everything. Just enough. She studied the projections, pupils dilating as pattern and possibility aligned. "If these indexes destabilize," she murmured, "the entire consortium's bioproduct chain becomes legally indefensible. And medically unreliable," I added. "Which is what you actually care about." Her mouth curved, despite herself. "You're proposing sabotage." "I'm proposing correction." She met my gaze. "You're proposing war, only on a system," I said. "Not on patients." Silence stretched. Then she nodded once. "Who else?" she asked. I hesitated. "Then Jonah. We brought him in that night. He looked smaller out of the medical block. More real. Hoodie, worn sneakers, a bruise on his wrist from a recent injection." "You're planning something stupid," he said after I finished. "Yes. Something illegal." "Yes. Something that might get you disappeared." "Almost certainly." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Cool. Just checking." "Why?" I asked quietly. "Why help me?" He met my eyes. "Because if this stuff exists," he said, "I want it to be because someone chose it. Not because someone was farmed for it." The closed servers came next. We ghosted into the internal consortium mirror, feeding Dr. Moore's altered compatibility models into non-critical channels. Testing. Tweaking. Watching how quickly the predictive algorithms destabilized. Too quickly. The system was a house of cards. I was deep in a projection matrix when the lights flickered. Just once. The security grid hiccuped. Dr. Moore's head snapped up. "That wasn't me," she said. "Neither was it." A new presence registered on the closed network. Encrypted. Internal. Authorized. And then a voice spoke quietly behind me. "You're going to collapse half the pharmaceutical market." I turned. Kieran stood in the doorway. No suit, no security detail. Just him, in dark clothes, eyes sharp and very, very awake. Jonah swore softly. Dr. Moore stiffened. I rose slowly. "You shouldn't be here," I said. "No," he agreed. "I shouldn't." He stepped closer, gaze flicking to the projections, to the compatibility curves unraveling like exposed wiring. "You found the fault line," he said. "I built one," I replied. He looked at me then. "Not as an asset. Not as a liability. As a decision." "Then," he said quietly, "you're going to need someone who knows where they keep the fire extinguishers." The fear that had lived in my chest for days shifted. Condensed. Focused. And for the first time since the system had closed around me, it made room for something dangerously close to hope. The boardroom had never felt so much like a courtroom. Long black table. Embedded screens. The city burning behind floor-to-ceiling glass like a living verdict. Every major shareholder seat was filled. Legal teams. Medical executives. Mara at the right hand of the consortium delegates. My uncle at the head. And me, seated exactly where collateral was meant to sit. Still. Visible. Contained. The medical bracelet was back on my wrist. The cameras were real this time. So were the guards. They thought they had closed the loop. They didn't know the system was already hemorrhaging. "Let's begin," Mara said smoothly. "This extraordinary session has been convened to formalize the biological security transfer and finalize debt consolidation." On the screens, my name appeared. Then, my genome. Then the contract. The document that reduced my existence to leverage. I felt the familiar pull of panic, tight chest, shallow breath, the instinct to disappear. I let it pass. Because the servers were already burning. Dr. Moore had timed it perfectly. 3 floors below us, predictive models were collapsing. Compatibility projections tearing themselves apart, as altered datasets fed back into proprietary algorithms. Every serum contract tied to carrier stability had just become a legal and scientific liability. A murmur rippled through the room, as first alerts bloomed across personal tablets. "Is there a problem?" one of the board members asked. "Minor fluctuation," Mara said, checking her screen. "Our systems are recalibrate." She stopped. Her pupils dilated. That was when the press hall doors across the complex unlocked. And the data went public. Every restricted archive we'd mapped. Every carrier profile. Every reassignment. Every erased name. Dumped into regulatory servers, medical oversight networks, and 5 international watchdog channels at once. The room exploded. What is this? Who authorized? These projections are impossible. Our stock just... My uncle stood. Shut it down, he snapped. Now. Sir, one of the tech officers said. Pale, it's recursive. The models are rewriting active contracts. Mara's fingers flew across her tablet. They've poisoned the indexes, she said. Every agreement tied to genetic collateral is now legally contradictory. Ownership clauses invalidate treatment licenses. Distribution permits void research authority. The consortium delegates were already on their feet. This is a breach, one of them barked. We will litigate? No, Kieran said. Every voice stilled. He rose slowly from his seat at the far end of the table. This, he continued, is a reckoning. All eyes turned to him. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and removed a slim, dark drive. This contains, he said evenly, the consortium's full internal registry, including acquisition protocols, containment facilities, and financial structures linking carrier custody to offshore medical monopolies. Mara stared at him. You don't understand what you're doing, she said. I understand exactly, he replied. He crossed the room and placed the drive on the table. Between my uncle and the consortium. Effective immediately, Kieran said. I am terminating my contract. Mara laughed, sharp and incredulous. You can't. I can, he replied. Because my contract was never purchased. He turned slightly. It was inherited. The room held its breath. My carrier status, he continued, was converted into administrative authority when my biological yield fell below threshold. Which makes this agreement. He tapped the tablet in front of Mara. A continuation of an acquisition process that began when I was 8. Shock rippled. And because those contracts were built on coerced genetic ownership, he said, every authority they granted me is legally contaminated. He met the consortium's gaze. So when I renounced them, he withdrew his hand from the tablet's biometric field. The screen went dark. They bleed back. The legal system stuttered. Then alarms erupted. Across the room, contracts blinked from active to under review to void pending criminal investigation. My uncle sagged into his chair. Richard Hale, a regulatory liaison, said through the emergency channel, You are required to remain on site. Mara turned slowly to me. Her composure had fractured. Not broken. Cracked. You planned this, she said. Yes, I replied. Her gaze flicked to my uncle. To Kieran. To the screens where erased names were reappearing. You have no idea what will happen now, she said. I do, I answered. People will stop disappearing quietly. Guards flooded the room. Legal teams scrambled. Press alerts lit the walls. Through it all, Kieran's gaze never left mine. The fear I'd carried for days finally burned through. Replaced by something hot, exhilarating, terrible, free. As officials began escorting the consortium delegates out, my uncle looked at me. Not as leverage. As a man watching his empire collapse. I tried to save us, he said hoarsely. He tried to save the structure, I replied. Not the people inside it. He closed his eyes. For the first time since I'd known him, he had nothing left to say. The boardroom emptied into chaos. The system reeled. And somewhere deep in its foundations, the contracts that had named me property were learning what it meant to cut their own creators open from the inside. They tried to take me anyway. The boardroom hadn't even finished emptying when the internal lockdown began. Steel shutters slid over glass. Elevators froze between floors. Emergency protocols flared across every screen like a dying constellation. Protect the asset, someone barked into a comm. Not the person. The asset. 2 security officers closed in, faster than the rest. Not corporate guards. Consortium. Their movements were different. Quieter. Trained for extraction, not escort. Lucas Hale, one of them said, already reaching. You're coming with us? No, Kieran snapped. He moved, but another team cut him off. Hands caught my arms. Something sharp pressed into my neck. The world tilted violently. They dragged me through corridors that no longer pretended to be humane. Past emergency lights. Past sealed doors. Toward the med center. The place where bodies stopped belonging to themselves. They strapped me to a diagnostic bed before the sedation fully hit. Cold restraints. Cool metal against skin already buzzing with wrongness. A figure leaned over me. Mara. Her lipstick was flawless. Her eyes were not. "You should have stayed in your lane," she said quietly. "You could have lived comfortably. Instead, you chose spectacle. People were dying," I said thickly. "People always die," she replied. "What matters is control." A technician rolled a portable analyzer beside me. Tubes gleamed under surgical light. "We're not transferring ownership," Mara continued. "We're preserving evidence." "What kind?" I asked. "The kind that still functions." The needle descended. I moved. Not away. Toward it. I tore the restraint from my right arm with a strength born from adrenaline and something darker, and grabbed the needle's housing. The sudden motion startled them just long enough. "Don't," Mara warned. I plunged it into my own vein. Pain bloomed white-hot and immediate. Not the neat sting of a medical draw, but a burning rush that climbed my arm and set my nerves on fire. The analyzer screamed. On the wall-mounted monitors, my blood illuminated the grid in branching patterns of light. Compatibility metrics spiked, then destabilized, then began rewriting. "What did you do?" One of the techs whispered. "I told you," I said, breath shaking. "You built the system on us." I yanked the tube free, and let my blood smear across the scanner's surface. Red, real, uncontained. Every contract tied to my genome was now interacting live with forensic capture software. Ownership clauses, acquisition histories, carrier registries. They weren't agreements anymore. They were evidence. The doors burst open. Security poured in. Then, regulators. Then medical oversight. Then Kieran, moving like something unleashed, eyes locked on me. "Get them off him," he ordered. They hesitated. Then the badges changed. Consortium authority flickered. Revoked. Guards fell back. Hands left my body. Mara stared at the screens. "No," she whispered. On every display, genetic ownership structures were unraveling into criminal documentation. Financial networks flagging themselves. Transfer chains exposing coercion markers. Carrier contracts reclassifying into trafficking records. The system wasn't just broken. It was testifying. A medic rushed to my side, pressing gauze to my arm. "Stay with me," she said. "I am," I replied hoarsely. Kieran was there. Close. His hands hovered, then landed carefully at my shoulders, grounding, real. "You shouldn't have done that," he said quietly. "Neither should they," I answered. The pain roared in my veins. A deep aching burn, like my blood had remembered every time it had been counted instead of felt. But with it came something else. Relief. Because the numbers on the screens were no longer projections. They were confessions. One by one, the MedCenter's monitors switched to emergency regulatory channels. Freeze orders. Arrest warrants. Facility seizures. Medical autonomy protocols activated. Somewhere in the building, someone began to cry. Somewhere else, someone shouted. And then, slowly, the noise receded. As if the system itself were exhaling for the first time, they wheeled me into the adjacent signing hall, now converted into an impromptu crisis command room. The tables where contracts had been formalized were covered in data pads showing nothing but red flags and jurisdiction seals. Mara stood alone at the center of it, very still. She looked at me. For the first time, not as leverage, as cost. "This won't end the market," she said. "No," I replied. "But it ends your right to feed it." Regulators closed in. She didn't resist. They took her. They took the consortium delegates. They took the drives. They took the authority. What they couldn't take was already gone. When they finally rolled me out of the hall, the lights were dimmer. The building quieter. The screens dark. Kieran walked beside the gurney. "Does it hurt?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Good," he murmured. "It means it's yours." I closed my eyes. The pain ebbed into a distant, manageable throb. Behind it lay something vast and unfamiliar. Silence. The kind that follows collapse. The kind that makes space. And for the first time since my name had appeared under biological guarantees, active, there was nothing left trying to claim it. Only me. Bleeding. Alive. And free. The office looked wrong without the market in it. No scrolling tickers. No quiet alerts. No low, anxious hum of systems calculating what someone was worth. Just empty desks. Dark screens. Sunlight spilling across glass that no longer reflected urgency. I stood in the middle of the floor, a paper cup of terrible coffee cooling in my hands, and felt hollow. Not in the broken way. In the way a room feels after furniture has been hauled out. Kieran leaned against a column nearby, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled, a thin bandage visible beneath the cuff of his shirt where regulators had drawn blood and history from him in equal measure. "They're sealing 3 facilities," he said. "Opening 12 investigations. The consortium's medical branch is under international freeze." "That fast?" I murmured. "Fear is very efficient," he replied. "So is paperwork, when it stops pretending." I huffed a quiet laugh. Of all the places for humor to survive, it kept choosing the strangest ruins. "Do you miss it?" I asked. "The tower?" "The machine," I clarified. He considered. "Sometimes I miss knowing exactly what I was," he said. "Tools are simple. And people?" He looked at me. "People are expensive." I smiled despite myself. The elevator ride to the roof passed in companionable silence. When the doors opened, night air rushed in, cool, unfiltered, carrying the distant sounds of a city that had not noticed its blood market catch fire. We stepped out onto the open concrete. Wind tugged at my hair. The skyline stretched endlessly, glittering and alive. I hadn't realized how long it had been since I'd been anywhere without walls. I walked to the edge and rested my hands on the railing. "I don't know what to do now," I admitted. Kieran came to stand beside me. "Neither do I." "That's supposed to scare me. Does it?" I searched myself. "No," I said slowly. "It doesn't." We stood there, shoulder to shoulder, not touching, not touching. "I keep waiting," I said, "for someone to tell me where I belong. And no one's coming." His mouth curved. "That's the first good sign." We didn't kiss on the roof. Not dramatically. Not triumphantly. We leaned into each other instead, foreheads briefly touching, breathing the same air like people who had survived the same storm and were still counting their limbs. Later, at his apartment, the quiet felt different than the quiet of offices. Warm. Lived in. There were books, stacked on the floor. A coat thrown over a chair. A kitchen that smelled faintly of citrus and something burnt beyond redemption. "You cook?" I asked. He grimaced. "In theory." We ended up on the couch with mismatched mugs and a bowl of cereal that had been intended as dinner until neither of us had the energy to argue. He told me about the first facility he'd been transferred to after they realized he wouldn't stabilize long term. About the way the walls had been padded and painted in colors meant to soothe. I told him about my first audit. About the night I'd slept under my desk and woken up convinced I'd died and been buried in spreadsheets. At some point, laughter threaded its way through the confessions. Soft. Disbelieving. Real. The physical closeness came easily after that. Not desperate. Not consuming. Just natural. I rested my head against his shoulder. His arm slid around me, tentative, as if he still expected permission to be required. "You don't have to be careful," I murmured. "I know," he said. "I just want to be." I shifted, turning enough to look at him. "Earlier," I said, when they asked if we were affiliated. He raised a brow. "That's a word." I said no, I continued. Then I realized that wasn't true. It just wasn't finished. His gaze softened. "Is it now?" he asked. I reached up, brushing my thumb lightly along his jaw. "Yes," I said. "If you want it to be." For a moment, the past hung between us like a held breath. Then he leaned in. This time, there was no almost. The kiss was slow. Uncertain. Warm. Not a victory. A choice. When we finally pulled back, he rested his forehead against mine. "Stay," he said. I smiled. "I wasn't planning on being owned," I replied. "But I could be convinced to belong." His quiet laugh vibrated through me. Outside, the city kept burning. Inside, something gentler had started to glow. And for the first time since the market had collapsed into ash, the future didn't feel like an emergency. It felt like space. The new office didn't smell like antiseptic. That was the first thing I noticed. No chemical sharpness, no sterile citrus. Just fresh paint, warm circuitry, coffee that actually smelled like coffee, and something green growing in a corner because Jonah had declared that if we're rebuilding medicine, we're starting with something that refuses to die politely. Sunlight poured through wide windows onto unfinished desks and unpacked boxes. No corporate banners. No wolf crests, no slogans about innovation, just space, and people. Dr. Moore stood near the central lab door, arguing gently with a young researcher about airflow regulation. Jonah was on a rolling chair, trying to navigate a stack of tablets like a doomed pirate ship. Kieran leaned beside me, arms folded, watching it all with an expression I still wasn't used to seeing on him. Contentment. "They're going to be late," he murmured. "They're scientists," I replied. "Lateness is a personality trait." Inside the lab, glass walls revealed a bright, open room filled with new equipment, unbranded and deliberately unspectacular. No proprietary seals, no hidden protocols. Just tools. Tools people could choose to use. The door opened. Our first official partner stepped inside. Maya Torres. Independent genetic consultant. Former whistleblower. The woman whose testimony had cracked 2 satellite facilities wide open. She looked around, taking it in. "So, this is it," she said. "The place that scared 3 pharmaceutical giants into rewriting their ethics statements. Overachievers," Jonah muttered. Maya smiled faintly and approached the central table. "I've reviewed your charter," she said. "Open source stabilization research. Voluntary carrier programs. Independent medical oversight. Profit caps. And no genetic ownership clauses," I added. Her gaze lifted to mine. "That's why I'm here." She slid a thin tablet across the table. "First voluntary participation contract," she said. "One of my clients. Non-carrier. Wants to fund the development of an alternative stabilizer that doesn't require living indexes." I stared at the document. Not because it was impressive, because it was clean. No traps. No shadows. No language that tried to pretend people were infrastructure. My name was at the bottom, not as collateral. As founder, owner. I took the stylus. For a moment, the memory of my uncle's signature flickered behind my eyes. Heavy. Permanent. Written over my life. Then I placed my own. The system chimed softly. Approved. The sound was nothing. And everything. Maya exhaled. Something like relief in it. "Congratulations," she said. "You just signed the first contract I've seen in 10 years that doesn't make me want to set something on fire." Jonah applauded weakly. High praise in this economy. She left soon after, already on her phone, already setting things in motion. The lab doors closed behind her. The office settled. Kieran turned to me. "Well," he said. "You've done it." "Done what?" "Built a problem," he replied. "With employees." I laughed. "Are you staying?" I asked. He arched a brow. "Do you need a consultant who specializes in dismantling hostile financial architectures and irritating powerful people?" "Desperately." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "What about someone who's very bad at leaving now that he's chosen something?" My chest warmed. "I think," I said, "we could find a position." We stood there, surrounded by half-assembled desks and glowing equipment, and the faint, hopeful chaos of something not yet defined. "What are we calling it?" he asked. I considered. "Not a pack," I said. "Not a corporation, not a project. Then what?" "A place," I replied. "Where nobody is born owing their blood." He studied me. Then nodded once. "That will upset a lot of people." "Good," I said. "We'll know we're doing it right." Later, after the others had drifted back into their work, I caught my reflection in the darkened lab glass. Same face. Same body. No longer priced. Kieran came up behind me, close enough that his presence settled without effort. "You look different," he said. "I signed my own name," I replied. "I think it did something to my posture." He huffed softly. I turned, resting my forehead against his. "Thank you," I said. "For what?" "For choosing wrong," I answered. "For the system." His breath brushed my lips. "Best decision I ever made." Outside, the city moved. Alive. Unaware. No longer quietly fed on. Inside, the lights hummed, not like servers. Like a home learning its own pulse. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't standing inside a machine. I was standing inside something we had built. Together. Not to own. But to keep.